Okay, so we've got this really fascinating collection of articles about how China is trying to influence Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like through internet personalities this time.
Right.
We're going to break down these strategies, look at some like real world examples here for people who've been involved, and
Yeah.
you might be surprised by what we find because things aren't always what they seem.
What I think is really fascinating is that China is like moving away from the traditional diplomatic strategies.
Right.
And they're really leaning into this world of social media and online influencers to really shape the narrative.
Yeah, that's really clever when you think about it because everyone is, glued to their phones these days, scrolling through endless feeds.
Right.
Where does it all begin though?
Well, a good place to start, I think, is with this Taiwanese YouTuber.
Okay.
His name is pronounced Ba Jiang.
Okay.
His real name is Wenziyu. And his channel is R Fun TV. And he has over 1 million subscribers.
Wow.
And he's known for his pretty direct commentary on China.
So not exactly pro-China then?
Not quite.
Okay.
And get this, he's partnered up with this Taiwanese rapper.
Okay.
His name is Oshu Chen Baiyun.
Okay.
He's known as OchiPYC.
Got it.
And what's interesting here is that Chen actually used to be a pro-China influencer himself.
Wow.
He even made music supporting China's policies.
Oh, wow. A change of heart.
Yeah.
What prompted this collaboration between these two people with, like, seemingly opposing views?
Well, they came together to create this documentary called China's United Front Work documentary, which aims to expose China's tactics.
So this has caused a stir.
Oh, yeah. This has caused a serious stir in Taiwan and mainland China.
Wow.
Sparked debate between Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council and China's Taiwan Affairs Office.
So it's a big deal.
Oh, it's a big deal.
Can you unpack this idea of United Front Work?
Sure.
For those of us who might not be super familiar with Chinese politics?
So United Front Work is basically a strategy that the Chinese Communist Party uses to build alliances and influence individuals and organizations, both within China and internationally.
Got it.
And in this context, it refers to their efforts to cultivate support and neutralize opposition in Taiwan.
So this documentary is claiming that China is using influencers as part of this United Front Work.
It's right.
I'm really curious to know what it reveals about how this all works.
Well, it exposes this kind of like carrot and stick approach that China uses to cultivate favorable content from Taiwanese influencers.
Right.
Think like financial incentives, travel opportunities, online promotion.
They make it worth their while.
Exactly. They basically make it worth their while to toe the line.
Would you compare this to like a traditional PR campaign?
It has some similarities with PR, but the objectives are a lot broader and a lot more strategic.
Got it.
It's about shaping perceptions, influencing public opinion, and ultimately advancing China's political goals in Taiwan.
This is bigger than just getting someone to endorse like a new pair of shoes or something.
Exactly. It's a lot more impactful than that.
Right.
And what's interesting is the documentary highlights the effectiveness of using seemingly harmless content to deliver these messages. Things like travel vlogs, food reviews, lifestyle content, stuff that doesn't immediately scream political propaganda.
Right. So you're watching a fun travel vlog and bam, you're suddenly being fed a pro-China narrative.
That's the idea.
Wow.
It's a very clever way to kind of bypass those pre-existing biases and reach a wider audience.
Now, you mentioned that Chen Baiyuan, the rapper,
had
this big change of heart.
Yeah.
What led him to go from supporting the Chinese Communist Party to becoming a critic?
So his story is really one of disillusionment. He claims it was a combination of personal betrayal, witnessing the realities of life in China firsthand, and encountering information outside of China's controlled media environment. And that's really what shifted his perspective.
Makes you wonder how many other people might be having similar experiences, but are hesitant to speak up.
It definitely raises some questions about the level of control and pressure that China exerts on those within its sphere of influence.
Now, the documentary also mentions something called the white ant tactic.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is?
So this term was actually coined by Acero Li Mengzhu. He's a Taiwanese businessman who was detained in China for 4 years.
Wow.
He describes this tactic as China's effort to co-opt individuals to subtly undermine Taiwan from within.
Oh, wow.
Much like termites slowly weakening a structure.
Interesting.
So it's about infiltration and erosion rather than like a direct attack.
Yeah, I'm starting to see how these seemingly disconnected pieces are fitting into a larger strategy.
It's all part of a carefully crafted plan.
Yeah.
And in the documentary, we see how this plays out with those all-expenses-paid trips to China for Taiwanese influencers.
Right.
It's presented as a chance to showcase the positive aspects of life there.
And it's packaged through those feel-good lenses we talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
Travel, food culture.
Right.
All very appealing and disarming.
Absolutely. It's all about creating a narrative that subtly promotes China's agenda without being overly forceful or aggressive.
The documentary also mentioned this rather controversial claim made by Lin Jincheng, who's involved with the Taiwanese entrepreneurial park in China.
Okay.
He stated that 200,000 Taiwanese citizens have obtained Chinese ID cards.
Right.
Which is a staggering number.
It's a claim that has naturally raised concerns in Taiwan.
I bet.
However, Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council has publicly disputed the figure.
Okay.
And warned of potential risks and legal ramifications for those who do obtain a Chinese ID card.
What kind of risks are we talking about?
Well, Taiwanese lawmakers have expressed serious concerns that providing personal information for Chinese ID cards could expose individuals to surveillance and control by Chinese authorities.
So it goes beyond just influencing opinions. It's about potentially gaining leverage over individuals through data collection.
Exactly. It's a very complex situation that touches on anxieties surrounding data privacy, individual freedom, and the potential repercussions for those who participate.
Yeah.
And the documentary even shares a story about 5 Taiwanese village chiefs who were discovered to hold Chinese citizenship and are now facing removal from office.
Oh, wow. The stakes are higher than I initially realized.
Yes.
And I imagine all of this feeds into those broader anxieties surrounding China's influence campaign in Taiwan.
Absolutely.
Right.
Taiwanese lawmakers and security experts see these tactics as part of a larger strategy to sway public opinion and potentially pave the way for unification.
Right.
It's a very multifaceted and evolving approach that requires careful analysis and scrutiny.
This is all so fascinating, and I have to admit, a bit unsettling. It makes you wonder how vulnerable we are to manipulation in the digital age.
It's a very legitimate concern. You know, this whole deep dive is about shining a light on these tactics so that you as a listener can better understand the complexities and equip yourself with the tools to think critically about the information you encounter.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge and being aware of the forces that might be trying to influence us.
Exactly. And remember, it's not just about being cautious about what we click on. It's about being more aware of the underlying agendas that might be shaping the content we consume every day.
Okay, I am ready to keep digging. Let's dive deeper into the implications of these influencer tactics and how they play out in the digital world.
All right, let's do it.
You mentioned earlier that the goal of China's influencer strategy is to, sow discord and confusion. How exactly do they achieve that? Is it just about spreading a bunch of different opinions and hoping people get confused?
It's a little bit more nuanced than that. One way they do this is by amplifying fringe voices or promoting narratives that exploit existing social divisions within Taiwan.
Right.
It's about strategically highlighting those fault lines that already exist and using them to their advantage.
So it's not about creating division out of thin air, but rather exacerbating existing tension.
Precisely. And the internet, with its echo chambers and algorithms, provides a perfect platform for this.
Right.
Think about those personalized news feeds that only show you content you already agree with.
Right.
That's like a breeding ground for confirmation bias.
Right.
It becomes really difficult to engage in productive conversations.
Yeah.
Or even consider alternative viewpoints when you're constantly being reinforced in your existing beliefs.
Yeah, it's like everyone's living in their own little bubble.
Exactly.
And those bubbles rarely intersect.
Exactly. And that's where the danger lies. Misinformation and propaganda can spread like wildfire within these echo chambers without being challenged or fact-checked. And it creates this distorted reality where people become increasingly distrustful of information that doesn't align with their preconceived notions.
Some might argue that this strategy of creating confusion ultimately backfires. If people can't trust any information source, they might just tune out altogether.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a valid point. Overloading people with conflicting information can lead to a sense of apathy and disengagement, making them less likely to participate in meaningful discussions or hold strong opinions.
Okay.
However, from China's perspective, that might not be entirely undesirable.
Really? So, wouldn't they want people to be actively engaged with their messaging?
While active support is always welcome,
Okay.
creating a climate of uncertainty and apathy can also serve their interests. A confused and disengaged populace is less likely to mobilize against their agenda or challenge their authority.
Right.
It weakens resistance and makes it easier to exert influence.
So it's not just about winning hearts and minds. It's about creating a climate where opposition is less likely to arise in the first place.
That's a key takeaway. It's about shaping the environment, the playing field, so to speak, in a way that benefits their long-term goals.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've got this potent mix of targeted messaging, echo chambers, and strategically amplified misinformation. All contributing to this atmosphere of discord and confusion. What can be done to counter these tactics?
Well, it requires a multi-pronged approach. On an individual level, it all starts with awareness. Understanding how these tactics work, developing critical thinking skills, questioning assumptions, evaluating sources. These are essential tools for navigating the digital landscape.
So it's not just about avoiding certain websites or sources, but about cultivating a more discerning approach to information consumption in general.
Exactly. Be skeptical, do your own research, be willing to engage in respectful dialogue with people who hold different views. Don't let yourself get trapped in an echo chamber.
But individual action can only go so far, right? What about on a larger scale? What can governments or platforms do to address this issue?
That's where things get a bit more complex. Some advocate for greater regulation of online content, particularly when it comes to misinformation and propaganda. However, others worry that this could infringe on freedom of speech and lead to censorship.
It's a delicate balance to strike between protecting people from harmful content and ensuring that free expression isn't stifled.
Indeed. It's an ongoing debate with no easy answers. Social media platforms like Facebook and YouTube are also making efforts to combat misinformation and increase transparency in their algorithms. But it's a constant battle against evolving tactics.
There's no quick fix or one-size-fits-all solution. It's about a combination of individual awareness, platform accountability, and perhaps some carefully considered regulations.
Exactly. And it requires ongoing vigilance and adaptation. And as new technologies emerge and the methods of influence become more sophisticated.
Now, this documentary focused primarily on YouTube, but are these influencer tactics being used on other platforms as well?
Oh, absolutely. TikTok is a prime example. It's incredibly popular, especially among younger audiences. And it's come under scrutiny for its potential as a tool for propaganda and misinformation.
Is that solely due to its Chinese ownership?
Well, the ownership structure certainly raises concerns. But the app's design itself is also a factor. TikTok is exceptionally good at tailoring content to individual preferences. Which makes it a powerful tool for shaping opinions and potentially steering users towards specific narratives.
So even if we're not actively seeking out political content, we could still be exposed to these influencer tactics on seemingly harmless platforms like TikTok.
That's the unsettling part. It's often woven into the fabric of our entertainment and social media experiences, making it even harder to detect. It's like a constant drip feed of subtle messaging that can gradually shape our perceptions without us even realizing it.
This all makes me wonder about the psychological impact of this constant bombardment of information. Do you think it's making us more susceptible to manipulation?
It's a valid concern. Our brains aren't wired to process the sheer volume of information we're exposed to on a daily basis. And this information overload can lead to cognitive fatigue, making us less critical and more prone to accepting information at face value.
It's almost like our critical thinking muscles get exhausted from being constantly flexed.
That's a great analogy. We start taking shortcuts and become less discerning in our information consumption.
So it's about being proactive and intentional in our approach to information, rather than just passively absorbing whatever comes our way.
Precisely. It's about taking control of our information diet and ensuring we're not being unknowingly influenced by agendas we don't support.
You mentioned that China isn't the only country using these tactics. Are there any specific examples that come to mind?
Well, Russia has been a major player in the online influence game for years. They've been accused of using social media to meddle in elections, spread propaganda, and sow discord in Western democracies. Their internet research agency, for instance, became infamous for its troll farms and sophisticated disinformation campaigns. So it's not just about influencing domestic audiences,
Right.
but also about projecting power and influence on a global scale.
And it's not limited to nation states either.
Right.
We're seeing these tactics being used by corporations, activist groups, and anyone with an agenda to push.
Exactly. The tools of online influence are readily available, and they're being adopted by a wide range of actors for various purposes.
It feels like we're caught in this web of influence, whether we realize it or not. How can we even begin to untangle it and make sense of it all?
It's a challenge, but not an insurmountable one.
Okay.
The key is to develop those critical thinking skills we've been discussing. Question everything. Consider the source. Look for evidence-based information.
Wow.
And don't be afraid to challenge narratives that seem too good to be true or play on your existing biases.
So it's not about becoming cynical or distrustful of everything, but about cultivating a healthy sense of skepticism and being aware of the potential for manipulation.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, these influencer tactics are constantly evolving, which means we need to be adaptable in our approach and continue to learn and refine our understanding of how they work. What worked yesterday might not work today.
Got it.
So we need to stay informed and keep our critical thinking caps on.
This has been incredibly insightful. It's making me think twice about everything I see online now.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
The more we understand about how information is being used to influence us, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions and resist manipulation. Knowledge is power. And that's what these deep dives are all about.
You mentioned earlier that China isn't the only one utilizing these tactics.
Right.
Are there any specific examples of other countries or organizations using influencer strategies in interesting ways?
Yeah, that's a great point. It seems like this whole battle for influence is happening everywhere, not just in politics.
Absolutely.
Do you have any examples of how these influencer strategies are being used in other contexts?
Oh, yeah. Take the health and wellness industry, for instance. You got all these fitness gurus and lifestyle influencers promoting specific diets, supplements, workout routines. While many of them are genuinely trying to help people, there's also a lot of misinformation and questionable products being pushed, often leveraging those same tactics of emotional appeal, social proof, carefully curated imagery.
So it's like that old saying, buyer beware.
Exactly.
We have to be just as discerning about the information we consume about our health as we are about political news.
Precisely. It's about applying those same critical thinking skills across the board. Who's behind the message? What are their credentials? Do they have any conflicts of interest?
These are all questions we should be asking ourselves no matter what kind of information we're consuming.
It's almost as if we need to become like amateur detectives in our own lives.
I love that.
Yeah.
Constantly evaluating the evidence, looking for clues to uncover hidden agendas. And the more we practice those detective skills, the better we'll become at spotting the red flags and making informed decisions. It's an ongoing process of learning and refining our understanding of how influence works.
In the digital age, this whole conversation has been incredibly eye-opening. It makes you wonder how we can stay ahead of the curve when it comes to recognizing and countering these types of strategies, because they just seem to be constantly evolving and becoming more and more sophisticated.
It's definitely a constant cat and mouse game. As soon as we become savvy to one tactic, those seeking to influence us adapt and find new ways to achieve their objectives.
It's like trying to hit a moving target. So it's not enough to just learn a set of rules or guidelines. We need to develop a mindset of critical thinking and skepticism, like a default setting for how we approach information online.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating that inner skeptic, that voice that questions everything and demands evidence before accepting something as true. We need to become more discerning media consumers, actively filtering the information we're bombarded with rather than just passively absorbing it.
It's honestly a bit overwhelming to think about.
It is.
It feels like we're up against a tidal wave of information, much of which is designed to manipulate or mislead us in some way.
It's definitely a challenge, but it's not insurmountable. And remember, it's not just about protecting ourselves, it's about protecting our societies as well. These influence tactics can have a corrosive effect on democracy, undermining trust in institutions and creating divisions among citizens.
Reminds me of that old saying, a house divided against itself cannot stand.
Exactly.
If we allow ourselves to be manipulated and pitted against each other, it just weakens the fabric of our communities. It makes us more vulnerable to those who seek to exploit those divisions.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so crucial to have open and honest conversations about these issues.
Yeah.
To promote media literacy and critical thinking and to foster a culture of respectful dialogue.
Right.
We need to recognize the common ground we share and work together to address these challenges, rather than allowing ourselves to be divided and conquered.
It's important to remember, though, that these tactics aren't always successful.
That's right.
Like, people aren't robots. They can think for themselves and make their own decisions.
Exactly. We have agency and the power to resist manipulation.
Yeah.
Influence is not the same as control.
Right.
People have the capacity to critically evaluate information,
Right.
recognize when they're being manipulated, and choose to reject those attempts to sway their opinions. It's about empowering individuals to recognize their own agency and make informed choices.
And sometimes the best way to counter misinformation is simply to provide accurate and reliable information.
Absolutely.
If people have access to credible sources and evidence-based reporting, they're less likely to fall prey to propaganda and manipulation.
Fact-checking and debunking false narratives are crucial aspects of combating misinformation.
Yeah.
But it's also important to present that information in a way that's engaging and accessible.
Right.
People are more likely to pay attention if the information is presented in a clear, concise, and compelling manner.
Because if it's too dry and boring or overly complicated, people are just going to tune out.
Exactly.
We need to find ways to make truth as captivating as fiction.
Exactly. We need to get creative and find innovative ways to cut through the noise.
Right.
And ensure that accurate information reaches the widest possible audience. It's about making truth as compelling and shareable as any piece of viral content.
So it's not just about being vigilant and skeptical. It's also about being proactive in promoting truth and accuracy.
Right.
It's about taking responsibility for the information we share.
Yeah.
And ensuring that we're not contributing to the spread of misinformation, even unintentionally.
That's a great point. We all have a role to play in creating a more informed and resilient society. It's about being mindful of our own media consumption habits.
Yeah.
Being critical of the information we encounter.
Right.
And being responsible in the information we choose to share.
This whole deep dive has been like a fascinating and thought-provoking journey.
It has.
We've uncovered a lot about China's influencer strategy. How it fits into their broader efforts to exert influence.
Right.
We've explored the tactics they employ, the platforms they leverage, the potential impact on both individuals and society as a whole.
Absolutely.
It's a complex and ever-evolving landscape.
It is.
But by understanding the dynamics at play, we can equip ourselves with the tools and knowledge we need to navigate it effectively. Knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
And the more we understand about how these influence tactics work, the better prepared we'll be to make informed decisions and protect ourselves from manipulation.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So what's the key takeaway for our listeners today?
Oh, that's a good question.
What should they be thinking about after they finish listening to this deep dive?
I'd say the most important takeaway is this. Be mindful.
Okay.
Be aware of the tactics being used to influence you both online and offline.
Right.
Develop those critical thinking skills, question your assumptions.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to dig deeper and seek out diverse perspectives.
Okay.
Remember, you have the power to choose what you believe and how you respond to the information you encounter.
Don't just accept everything at face value.
Right.
Do your own research. Ask questions. Engage in respectful dialogue with others. And remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about how these influence tactics work, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this complex world and make informed decisions that align with our values.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration.
My pleasure.
Remember, this is just the beginning. Keep asking questions, keep digging for answers, and stay engaged in the ongoing conversation about how to navigate the ever-evolving landscape of information and influence.